morning, welcome. We're going to discuss today something which is beyond forgiveness. Sometimes when we get caught up in the details of how mechila is supposed to happen, how tshuvah is supposed to happen, we could forget about the overarching theme of what's really supposed to happen in tshuvah. And I want to discuss something, and we're calling today's class Beyond Forgiveness, because really it is beyond forgiveness. It's a deeper level within forgiveness. We're going to learn today the second perek, the second chapter of Igeres HaTshuvah. For those that want to follow along, there's books here. And this second chapter is really a continuation from the first. So a brief summary, what did we say in the first chapter? We explained that there's various forms of tshuvah. It's on page 1017 in Lessons in Tanya, 1017. We explained that when it comes to doing tshuvah, there's several different types of atonement that's needed. It depends what the person did. If a person did an avera which he omitted a positive mitzvah, he didn't put on tefillin, or he didn't eat matzah or something like that, then that requires one form of atonement. He does tshuvah, Hashem forgives him. If he transgressed, if a person did something wrong, he violated something, that requires, in addition to tshuvah, he has to have the washing away from any blemish that his neshama now carries because of the avera that he did. So when a person does something negative against Hashem's will, it causes something in his neshama. Let's call it a blemish, a streak, a dirt, and a process is required to get rid of that. And therefore, when it comes to doing tshuvah, the person does tshuvah right away, hopefully, but his full atonement only happens on Yom Kippur. That's when he gets forgiven. But then there's a third mitzvah, and a third category, and that's when a person transgresses or a person violates a mitzvah, that does an avera, a sin, which is not just a violation, it's a big one. For example, it's eating on Yom Kippur, it's eating chametz on Pesach, it's the laws of family purity. Areas that Torah says it's much harsher because it carries the issur of kares, or in certain instances it would be nisas bezdin, which means that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, within certain guidelines they could get a death penalty. Then even Yom Kippur is not enough to bring atonement. He does tshuvah right away. He gets atonement on Yom Kippur, but during his lifetime, certain challenges, what he calls yisurim or suffering, it solidifies and completes his kapara, his washing away of the problems or the impacts of the soul. Now, I want to just clarify again, I said this before, that when we learn about suffering, number one, it does not mean that a person has to suffer tremendously. There's a Gemara, a Medrash, which tells us that even the example of a person puts his hand in his pocket to take out a coin, and it's not in that pocket, it's in the other pocket, or it's too deep down, it's hard for him to get it. You get frustrated, like, what's going on? You're annoyed. That's also a certain kapara. Even that's a yisurim, which means when a person goes through challenges, frustrations, annoyances, and of course, God forbid, if something is really negative, that is cleaning off their neshama, it cleans off their soul. Now, secondly, God forbid to look at someone and say, oh, if they're suffering, there must be a problem that they're atoning for. We're never allowed to say that. We don't know God's book. We don't know what's considered good, what's considered the rest of the picture, so to speak, and you're never allowed to look at someone else and say, oh, you know why they're going through that problem? They must have done something wrong and God is cleaning them. God forbid. If you look at yourself and you choose to have that level of faith and say, my challenge, my frustration is because Hashem is cleansing my soul or refining me, then that's permissible. But to say about someone else, God forbid, we can never say such a thing about someone else. When you see someone suffering, don't justify it. Come to Hashem and say, why is he suffering? There's a tzaddik that once said that you have to learn from everything, even from an atheist. What could you learn from an atheist who denies God's existence? He says, if someone knocks on your door and says, I'm hungry, or I need help financially, or help me out, don't say, I trust in God. God will help this person. For a moment, act like the atheist and say, if I don't help him, who will? When it comes to someone else, you should go out of your way and don't become all of a sudden this big believer and you have so much faith and you say, Hashem will provide for him. So there's a similar concept. When you see someone else suffering, don't apply anything that we learned here, and we say, oh, suffering or challenges cleanse us, refine us, and so on. As an example, sometimes you'll notice that a person who went through certain challenges has a different perspective on life. They value things differently. They look at their priorities in a much greater way. Sometimes this happens to a person as a result of the challenge they went through. Nobody should go through any challenges, but it's an example where you find that sometimes the challenge causes a shift in the perspective. To the extent that some of our sages, some of Chazal, would literally give tremendous reverence and honor to someone who went through certain sufferings or challenges, because they felt that they're much more in tune with their neshama. They're more refined in a way because of what they went through, the process, they grew from the process. But the concept, and in summary what we're saying in chapter 3 is that you can't bring the suffering upon yourself. You can't say, oh, I want to refine myself, I did Tshuvah, I asked Hashem to forgive me, but now there's some blemish left, let me cause some suffering, God forbid, to myself. That you're not allowed to do. Only Hashem, if He wants to, and if He thinks it's important, He could bring the challenge on the person. What's an example of bringing suffering to yourself? It's fasting. A person says, you know what, I'm not going to eat. I'll skip a day. I don't mean a diet where it's the latest thing to go on a water day or skip eating. Intermittent fasting. If a person says, I want to fast because I want to inflict some kind of hurt or suffering or inconvenience on myself, that's not allowed. Okay? What is Tshuvah according to Chassidus? Taken obviously from halacha, Tshuvah is azivas hachet, which means leaving the sin, that is Tshuvah. If a person spent his whole life, or a large amount of their life, doing wrong things, what does it mean to become a Baal Tshuvah? What does it mean that I'm now returning to Hashem? What do I need to do? So the answer is, I need to do one thing. Leave that path of those behaviors. That's Tshuvah. Kapara, washing away any negative effects of that behavior, that's some other things that are needed. Vidui, which is confession. Yom Kippur does certain things. Certain challenges, depending on the sin, does even more to clean it away. But Tshuvah in itself, what does it mean? Tshuvah, it means I left that way. And you can do Tshuvah in an instant. Okay, when a person sincerely says, I'm stopping that, and even if unfortunately he goes back to it at some point, when he said I'm stopping that, he was sincere, and he truly resolved for the future not to do it again, that is Tshuvah. Reb Reuven Dunin was a great chassid. He's passed away several years ago, but he was an individual who grew up in Israel, not religious, and when in 1958 he was a teenager, he was 17, he went to yeshiva in Kfar Chabad, and he decided he wants to become observant, and he started doing Torah mitzvahs, and he really changed his life around completely. He was a person, in his own description, who was behaving very, very bad, is what he said, up until that point. And he changed his life around. He came to the Rebbe, about 6 months after he became a Baal Tshuvah, he came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he finally got a private audience, and he says, Rebbe, give me a tikkun, give me a correction, how can I fix all of the past in my life? And the Rebbe looked at him and he said, first, involve yourself in learning, and in davening, and in doing mitzvahs with joy, and try to bring others to do mitzvahs, and with happiness. And the time comes, we'll talk about tikkun. And the Rebbe basically told him is the focus on Tshuvah is your behavior going forward. Of course, other things have to happen, but we can't forget what's the most important part. The most important part is not paying for what you did. The most important part is the future. The most important part is that now I'm a different person. Okay, there's certain bills that have to be paid from the past, they have to be dealt with, a person has to cleanse certain things, get rid of negative effects, and so on. But the point is going forward. That means that in my mind and in my heart, I'm saying, I want to be different. And I am different, and I could do that. Processes, depends what they are. Certain things take Yom Kippur, certain things take more than Yom Kippur, certain things happen instantly, but that's secondary. Chapter 2. Kol zeh, however, all of this that we've said until this point, that a person has Tshuvah and Yom Kippur and certain types of challenges that help get rid of any negative effects of sin. This is all regarding the kapara, the washing away, umechilas ha'avein, and to forgive from the sin that may have been transgressed. If a person goes through this process of doing Tshuvah, going through Yom Kippur, having certain challenges, and truly dropping what he did till now, Hashem forgives him, and now he no longer has any punishment, or when the day of judgment comes after 120 years, Hashem will not judge him for his misdeeds because he truly did Tshuvah. And we stressed this last week from the Rambam. Well, once a person does Tshuvah, he pays no more for his sins. These are paid, taken care of. It's forgiven. Forgiven means Hashem says, over. I'm not coming back on the old accounts. Because you've changed, you've asked for forgiveness. That's all great, and it really works. They do not remind him anything, even a half an item, on the day of judgment to punish him, God forbid, for this in the world to come. And as a result of Tshuvah, a person is pater completely from any judgment in Elam Haba. So if a person, let's just use an example, a person knowingly, he grew up with Shabbos, he knows the value of it, he's been doing this for a long time, and one day he says, forget it, I'm not keeping Shabbos. And then he regrets it, and he does Tshuvah, and he asks Hashem to forgive him, and he's sincere. 70, 80, 100 years later, he passes away and goes to heaven. They will not tell him, hey, what about that Shabbos that you missed? Why? Because he did true Tshuvah. And when you do true Tshuvah, it gets forgiven, and nothing gets mentioned at all. But here we have a very interesting thing. Forget forgiveness. Let's go beyond forgiveness. There's something greater than that. And the example that he brings is you want to be as favorable and cherished by Hashem the way you were before the sin. Okay? You want to have that innocence. You want that when Hashem looks at you and your relationship with Hashem, that our prayers are answered differently, we're looked at differently. We're not someone that had a mess up, so to speak, and Hashem says, okay, that's great, and I forgive you, but listen, imagine two people were friends, okay, and you hurt somebody, you really hurt their feelings, okay, you took care of it, you asked for forgiveness, and you're not doing it again, and truly you're not doing it again, so your relationship is repaired. But you have someone else who's been a loyal friend and never messed up, and never had to ask for forgiveness. How do you look at that person? It's a little bit of a different type of relationship. It's not strained. Okay? Or the example we have in Chazal, when we daven, the gates of heaven are always open. Okay? Anyone that davens, you could pierce through the gates of heaven, and Hashem answers your prayers, Hashem listens to your prayers. What about a child that davens? So it says, Tinekes shel beis Rabban, children who daven, it's a much more powerful tefillah, it's a much more powerful prayer. Why? Because they're innocent. They don't have that perhaps history or journey or other things that may happen along the way adults do when we daven. There's a certain purity in children. And that's why Hashem never is nimas, never gets disgusted or turns away from the tefillah of children. So if a person did Tshuvah and Hashem forgives him, that's great. But how can I achieve the status, the pre-sin status with Hashem? We took care of punishment, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid of judgment because I did Tshuvah. I'm not afraid of Gehenna because I did Tshuvah. It's all good. And I'm even going through a process to clean any effects of the sin. But what about the relationship between me and Hashem? Can I restore and come back to a clean slate as if nothing ever happened? Okay, so we understand, we follow? It's one thing to get rid of punishment. It's one thing to be forgiven. It's another thing that I want to be mirutzeh. I want to be desirable by Hashem in the same level as I was before. So in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, what would people do? They would bring a carbon, bring an offering. And when you bring a carbon, you're coming to Hashem and giving him, if you will, a gift. It's like a king. If somebody angered the king, you did something wrong, the king could kill you, okay? But you sent somebody to ask the king for forgiveness, you have a connection, someone the king likes, he spoke to the king, and he said, okay, I'm going to forgive you. And he did forgive you, he's not going to punish you. But now you're uncomfortable. How can I face the king now? I messed up. I mean, he forgave me. So what do? You bring him a gift. You send a gift to the king, and the gift expresses that you really want to have that relationship again in a very good way. Similarly, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, we would bring a korban, we would bring an offering, and this korban, this sacrifice, this animal that we brought to the Beis HaMikdash as a korban oila, would be this gift to Hashem to bring back the relationship, again, beyond punishment, we got beyond that, to bring back the relationship to the status that it was before the sin. We're friends now. We're not just not enemies. We're friends. We're on good terms. We're merutza. We're desired. And this korban was brought even on a very minor mitzvah. A person forgot something minuscule, okay, which doesn't have kares. It doesn't have the punishment of misas bezdin. And Chazal tell us, our sages tell us that if a person did this, then Hashem forgives him. And the Gemara in Zvachim tells us, the first chapter of Zvachim, that oila, a korban oila, brings atonement for a mitzvah saseh, and it's a gift after you did Tshuvah and you were forgiven on the punishment. Okay, so if I did Tshuvah and Hashem forgave me because my Tshuvah was sincere, my behavior expresses that I left that path, now I want to bring a gift. I want to bring a korban to Hashem. I want to express. I want to come back to the original status of the relationship. For example, he says, a person that hurt, that offended, that impacted, that did something wrong with the king, and he came back on good terms with him. Are they praklitin? He sent different people to speak to the king, and they forgave him. Nonetheless, why are you bringing a gift to the king? He forgave you. What do you want? He sends him a gift. The fana before him, he should be willing to see the king again, to see him again in front of the king. And the Alter Rebbe takes us further, and he says, when Torah tells us the word kapara regarding a korban, it's mechaperes. What he's really saying here is, who is the kapara for? It's not the kapara for me. I got my kapara. I asked Hashem for forgiveness. It's a kapara in front of Hashem, that Hashem should have nachas from me. Okay, so we're trying to go to a higher level where tamim yiyah l'ratzain, it's going to be complete, desirable to Hashem. The person made a mistake on purpose. He did something wrong. He went to Hashem for forgiveness. But now he's bringing another level of forgiveness. He wants that Hashem should be happy to see him. He should bring nachas to Hashem. He wants to cause something positive, something favorable, a pleasant aroma for Hashem. That's in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. What do we do today? Today we don't have a korban. We don't have the opportunity to bring a korban. So how could we reach that relationship level where Hashem wants us just like before? So do we say, sorry, too bad, just wait for Mashiach to come and then you're stuck? So it says, V'achshav, now that we don't have a korban, and we can't bring out that desire from Hashem to have that pleasant relationship with us, what we do now is it's hatainis. We have fasting. When a person fasts, that's instead of a korban. As the Gemara says, when a person says, I am not going to eat today, so I'm going to have a decrease in my fats, in my blood, in my flesh, because I'm not eating, it's going to be considered as if I brought you an animal. Because the physical being is like an animal. And instead of bringing a korban, because I can't bring an offering now, I'm going to fast today, or a half a day. And as a result of that, I'm giving something to Hashem. We'll get to the question soon. I'm giving something to Hashem. And I am restating and coming back to a level where Hashem is pleasant with me. So fasting is not for Tshuvah. Tshuvah is leaving the Aveira, leaving the sin, leaving that behavior. Tshuvah is asking for forgiveness. Fasting is not part of Tshuvah. Fasting is a different stage. You want to bring your relationship to Hashem on a deeper level. You want to bring it back pre-sin state. You got rid of punishment. You have your forgiveness. That's what fasting is about. So he stresses that fasting is not for Tshuvah. Fasting is for that higher level where you want to be closer to Hashem than before. We're soon going to discuss how the Rebbe tells us about if fasting even applies today. But let's first understand what does fasting here mean. And therefore we find that many Tanoim, authors of the Mishnah, Amayroyim, authors of the Talmud of the Gemara, they would fast even for very minor things. Okay? They would fast many fasts. And he's going to bring 3 examples, 3 stories of Tanoim that fasted for things that they've done. For example, number 1, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. Now, there is a difference of opinion regarding a certain law of Shabbos. We know that on Shabbos we have to rest from work. We can't work on Shabbos. Not only that, Torah says your servant, your slave has to rest. Not only that, but your animal can't work on Shabbos. Give them a day of rest. Now, one of the things you can't do on Shabbos, you can't go out with objects unless there's an Eruv in a public domain. Your animal, you can't say, you know what, my friend needs something, a book. I'll put the book on my animal, and then I'll walk my animal to my friend's house, and then I'll take the book. Because your animal also has to rest. There's a debate, what happens with an object that's for the animal's benefit. It's not for your benefit. Maybe it's a collar of some sort, something on the animal. Okay? Like a coat. Can an animal wear a coat if it needs the protection? Of course it can. But there was a certain discussion about a particular strap, a particular tshuvah between the horns of the animal. Maybe it was for decoration, for beauty or something. Can the animal go out with that particular strap on its horns or not on Shabbos? Now there's a machlekes, there's an argument. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says, no problem. It's not a violation of Shabbos. Chazal, majority of our sages, they say it is a violation, it's prohibited. Okay? That's the context. Now the law goes according to majority, and therefore we ruled you're not allowed to go out with this. Your animal can't have this strap in its horns on Shabbos, in the public domain. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah walks outside, and he sees his neighbor's animal walking out, and it has the strap in its horns. And he didn't say anything to his neighbor. He didn't say, you know, it's Shabbos, this is forbidden. Don't do that. Which is a requirement. If you see someone making a mistake, I don't mean someone that doesn't know what Shabbos is. His neighbor was an observant person who keeps everything else about Shabbos. He's doing something wrong now, and tell him, by the way, this is forbidden. Remind him or encourage him to do the right thing. And he didn't. The Gemara tells us his teeth became black from fasting. He fasted, I don't know how many fasts you need to fast that your teeth become black, malnourished, and literally darkened. It means he ate at night. Very, very minimal. But he really, really fasted many, many fasts. Why? Because my friends, meaning the other Chazal, the other Chachamim, they are of the opinion that it's not allowed, and the ruling is according to them because it goes by the majority. I didn't even do the sin. I saw my friend do it, my neighbor, and I didn't tell them not to. Now, why should I tell them not to? I'm of the opinion that it's okay. What did he do? He fasted to atone, or not to atone, to reach a level of a relationship with Hashem that I made a mistake. I should have really said something. Okay, that's one example. Rabbi Yeshua. There's a story about Rabbi Yeshua who was sitting together with Beis Shammai, the school of Shammai, and someone said something. They had a certain opinion. He responded about Jewish law. He responded, "Beishni midivrechem Beis Shammai." I'm embarrassed of what you just said. Like, this is so absurd. So he said something. It was l'shem shamayim. It was for the sake of heaven. He wanted to make sure that the proper halacha comes out. But the term that he used was, I'm embarrassed what you're saying. He didn't offend them. He just said, whoa, this is embarrassing to hear. Such an opinion. Okay? Later he found out that what they said had merit, and it was really correct. His teeth became black from fasting. What did I do? Did I hurt someone's feelings? We were having a discussion. But I used an expression, a terminology, which is less than the most respectful way. Is that a sin that requires forgiveness? Is that a sin that requires atonement? But they fasted to reach a level pre that transgression. Third story. You know that we have many halachas, many laws regards to tefillin. Okay. And one of them is that tefillin has to be black. It's halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai that the tefillin, the color of the tefillin should be black. Not only do the tefillin have to be black, but the straps should also be black. Therefore, when you have these straps on your head, you have to make sure that the side that's black is facing outward. Okay, because the inside, now they have black, both sides black sometimes, but the inside is a grayish, it's raw. Now, it's not so much for the straps that go this way, although you should try to keep the black on the outside, but it's more for the one on your head. That the outside part of the strap should be black. So Rav Huna, one time, his ritzua, his strap of tefillin on his head, turned upside down. Now, is that a sin? He has black ritzuas, but it turned over, and he wore the tefillin with the black, without black on the outside. He fasted 40 fasts. Okay, which 40 we know is a very powerful number. 40 is the idea of Tshuvah. 40 is davening. We have 40 by learning. 40 is a very powerful thing. He fasted 40 fasts because of that Aveda. The Kohena rabbis, and there are many examples of this, where Tanoim and Amirayim did very minuscule things, which you can't even fault them. There's no punishment here of any sort. They don't even need to do a Tshuvah, but they fasted. Why? Because they want to restore the state of the relationship between them and Hashem, like an innocence of a child who never committed any sin. Even though it's not about punishment anymore. That's not our whole concept here altogether. We're not serving Hashem because for reward and punishment. It exists. But the point is a relationship. You're serving Hashem. You want to turn to Hashem. So when you do something wrong, you have to ask for forgiveness, and you have to do all these steps that are required. But beyond all that, I want to get closer to Hashem. I want to stop here for a moment to take questions.
I thought that we don't fast in our days.
Very good. We don't fast in our days. I'm going to explain that in a minute. Very, very good. Okay.
What's the difference between the punishment of being cleansed and the punishment that gets absolved when you do Teshuvah?
So it depends what the mitzvah was. A positive mitzvah, you do Teshuvah sincerely, Hashem forgives you on the spot. You don't even have to wait till Yom Kippur. I forgot to light Hanukkah candles. You do Teshuvah, Hashem forgives you. If it's sincere. If a person transgressed, he did something which is Isser Malchus, like he didn't put on tefillin, for example. I'm sorry, that's a positive commandment. He did something he shouldn't have done. Okay, he wore shatnez. He wore wool and linen together. So it's not an Isser Kares. It's not, for such a thing, he does Tshuvah, and the Tshuvah hangs. It's like in a intermediate stage. It's pending. And then when Yom Kippur comes, he gets his complete atonement. Because Yom Kippur has the power to bring atonement. So a positive mitzvah, instant Tshuvah, instant forgiveness if you mean it. A negative mitzvah, you got to wait until Yom Kippur, do Tshuvah now, and wait till Yom Kippur to have the completion of it. But then there are levels of transgressions that are much more harsh, that they're called Isurei Kares. I brought the example of eating chametz on Pesach, eating on Yom Kippur, certain forbidden relations. Isur Kares is a much deeper Isur. And something like that, Tshuvah, Yom Kippur, but it's still hanging. And the Yisur and the challenges that a person goes through, that wipes it away. As a result of those three together, when he gets judged, whether it's today or after 120 years, any type of judgment, it cleans it up completely. It's as if he never did it, in the sense of punishment. Okay? But what we're discussing here is, beyond these three steps, I want to have a relationship with Hashem which is not tainted. Not, okay, I paid my bill, so now you're not going to hurt me. Okay. But it's about a relationship. I want to have a connection to Hashem. I should be nisratze, desirable to Hashem, as if I never did anything wrong.
If you're truly forgiven by Hashem, then there's no restoring relations. It's like you're forgiven.
Yes, you're forgiven, but there's two parts. There's forgiven that Hashem is not going to punish you, but then there's like a king. Sometimes if someone does something wrong to a king, he gets forgiven, hopefully, but the king still looks at him a little bit differently. It's not the same. So he brings him a gift, and that gift makes them like friends again. He says you actually like the king, you care about the king. And that's why in the times of the Beis HaMikdash they would bring a carbon. Because a carbon, an offering, is turning to Hashem and saying, I want to come back the way I was before. Not just, okay, I don't want to get hit, so you forgave me. And based on this foundation about fasting and what it's trying to accomplish and the relationship that it brings between us and Hashem, Limeid HaArizal, the Arizal, the great Kabbalist, taught his students, based on Chachmas HaEmes, how many fasts to fast for which sins. Even though these sins have no kares, no misa b'dei shamayim, these are sins which are not harsh, if you will. For example, kas, anger. Where in the Torah does it say not to get angry? There's no such commandment. There's no violation. It's not one of the 613, don't get angry. But the Arizal told his students that if you got angry, you know how many times you should fast? Ready?
40.
151. Now you're mad. But the concept is that this is something which is not about forgiveness. You don't need forgiveness for anger. Hashem doesn't have to forgive you. There's no punishment. I mean, it leads to some of the very terrible things through getting angry, and people have paid tremendously for their anger. But as far as an aveira, a biblical prohibition, or some type of forgiveness that's needed and so on, it's not. But still, Hashem doesn't want you to get angry. It's not a Yisr Kares. And the Arizal told the students, you got angry? Fast, 151 fasts to restore that relationship to Hashem. Now we know that anger expresses, there was once a story about a Chassid, one of the Rabbeim, who he was very wealthy and very honored, respected, but he had an anger issue. And he came to his Rebbe and he said, show me how I could avoid anger. People say things, they do things, it gets me really mad. Rebbe gave him a bracha and he said, are you here for Shabbos? He said, yes, okay. As soon as this chassid walked out, his Rebbe calls in the gabbai, the attendant, the helper in shul, and he says, this Shabbos, the wealthy man, don't give him an aliyah to the Torah, give him Gilila. Okay? Gilila is tying the Torah, it's a great honor, but it's the honor which could also be given to children. So if you have a guest in town and you really want to give him an honor, you probably give him one of the aliyahs. Not to minimize Gilila, but it's seen a certain way. This gabbai was really worried, because here's the wealthy man, I don't want to get on his bad side, but the Rebbe said to give him Gilila, so what should I do? So he called him aside and he said, listen, I have instructions, nothing personal, but the Rebbe told me to give you Gilila the Shabbos, so you should just know you're getting Gilila, you're not getting an aliyah. Fine. He has no idea why, but he comes to shul, he has his talus over his head, and he's, bracing himself, and sure enough, it comes to Gilila, and he calls him up for Gilila, he comes, he does Gilila, and he finishes. Later, the Rebbe asks him, tell me, were you upset that you got Gilila this week and not an aliyah? He said, no. He said, why? He says, because I knew it was a directive from above, meaning from you. I knew that it came from, I wasn't offended, it was an instruction from Hashem, from you, so I get it. The Rebbe said, that's how you overcome anger. Anytime something happens, don't think it's the guy in front of you who offended you and now you're angry at him. It's a directive from above. And therefore, just like now you said, it's not the gabbai, he was instructed, so he did it. The person that offended you, yes, they have free choice and they shouldn't do it. But your attitude towards it should be, Hashem has a reason why I have to feel this way or hear this. Let me not get so offended or angry. Just a side note about anger. But the idea is, the concept is that anger is something which we know from deeper learning and from Chassidus, that anger is a keen, as the Gemara says, to serving idols. Because if you truly believe in Hashem, then you may be annoyed at something, you don't like the way it's turning out, but angry means that you're insisting it shouldn't be this way. That means you're saying, Hashem, why you're wrong. Why are you doing this to me? Again, for someone else, you could say, Hashem, don't do this. For yourself, you say, listen, I trust you, I believe you. If you get angry, you lose it, that's a key to idol worship, because something's lacking in that faith. So he said you should fast 151 fasts. And even an Isur D'Rabbanan, even something which is a rabbinic transgression. Okay? For example, Stam Yenam, regular wine. Now, wine, many people don't realize, has to be kosher. Why does it have to be kosher? It comes from grapes. Because wine that was poured in front of an idol is considered to be Avodah Zarah, it's the Ayin Nesech, and we're not allowed to drink it. We're not even allowed to have any benefit from it. You can't even go and sell it. Okay? But rabbinically, midrabanan, if you gave it to an idol worshiper, or if we're assuming that any non-Jew is going to potentially worship an idol, so the wine that he touched or had, then let's not assume anything. But the Chazal said, our sages tell us that this wine, don't use it. Okay, it's a rabbinic prohibition that wine should be manufactured by a Yid. Okay, nothing personal to anyone that's not Jewish. It's just a kosher thing. So it's a rabbinic prohibition, and someone that made a mistake or that transgressed that should fast 73 fasts. And the same thing of not doing is a mitzvah's asay d'Rabbanan, like prayer. Davening is a d'Rabbanan. It's an important commandment, but it's not d'Oraisa. Biblical commandment is to pray when you have an issue. Pray 3 times a day is d'Rabbanan. Someone that missed the tefillah, they would fast 61 fasts for one mincha, right? Generally speaking, the secret of Tainiyos is a segula nefla. It's a wondrous segula to the revelation of Ratzon Elyon Baruch Hu, the desire of Hashem, just like a carbon, as it says, Reach Nichayach LaHashem. It says regarding, the Torah tells us when someone brings a carbon, it's a Reach Nichayach, it's a pleasant aroma for Hashem. When you fast and you're giving up from your eating and drinking, which you're decreasing your flesh, your blood, so to speak, for Hashem, that's like bringing a carbon. As it says in Yeshaya, the prophet says, we see from the verse of Yeshaya, Isaiah, that fasting makes you desirable to Hashem. Now, we just learned a full chapter about the value of fasting. And I want to make 2 disclaimers. But 1 disclaimer and 1 clarification. Number 1, first a disclaimer. We learn later that if someone gets weak from fasting because he's just not up to it, he can't fast 40 days straight and eat a piece of bread at night and still function like a normal person, then not only does he not have to fast, but it's a sin to fast. Because you're not able to properly serve Hashem, to daven, to pray, to concentrate, take care of your family, work, whatever your responsibilities are in life, if you're going to fast. And you know yourself, most people can, a regular fast day, a Yom Kippur, a Teshuvah, it's difficult. Okay? You're not functioning. It's not just an extracurricular thing. I'll skip a meal, big deal. So if that's the case, you're not allowed to fast. There are other ways through giving charity, extra tzedakah, because money that you could have spent on food, and you're giving it away. And in general, you're giving away something. Money is an idea that a person earns money. It's his entire being was involved in that. He thought about what he was doing. He physically labored to do it. He's tired, exhausted from the work that he was doing. And he earned $1. And that dollar, or part of that dollar he gives away, he's giving away to charity, he's giving away to Hashem something of his whole existence, similar to not eating. We'll elaborate on this more. But the Rebbe says that in today's day and age, fasting is not a path. It's not something we should strive to do. We have the biblical and rabbinic fasts that we have to do, like Yom Kippur, the 5 fasts during the year, right? Yom Kippur and Tzem Gedalia, Yom Kippur, 10th of Teves, Tanis Esther, 17th of Tammuz, and Teshuvah. Okay, and these 6 days are fast days. But otherwise, to add our own fasts and look to fast, we don't do that. Why? Because we're not strong enough as humans today. Our body is not physically able to endure fasting without proper nourishment is required. We should look at it from the other side. Let's try to be healthy and take care of our bodies and eat well and sleep well and so on, that we could serve Hashem better. We're going to learn what we do and how we reach this state of becoming more mirutza, desirable by Hashem. But in summary, it's underscoring again what is our perspective on Tshuvah. Our Tshuvah perspective is way more and than just getting forgiven. It's way more than getting out of the punishment. That goes without saying. That of course we have to do. We want to get rid of any negative effect of the sin. We want to leave that behavior and look to the future. We want to resolve not to do it again. We want to have remorse, regret what we did, remorse through confession, and resolve for the future. That in the future we should not do this behavior anymore. And then we're looking, how can we repair our relationship? How can we bring it closer? One way was through fasting, but that's not our path today. And God willing, tomorrow we'll continue and we'll learn what is the way that we could bring our relationship to Hashem again. Any questions?